Hi guys, Pim DSLR Productions here. Today we're gonna talk about water cooling. Water cooling. Who hasn't heard of it and who doesn't want it in their super cool computer to make it even more super cool? But people don't know where to start, what to buy and how to do it. Let's see what you need to know to prevent unhappy situations. A water block. This is the block you mount on the hardware to be cooled. In this guide we just be cooling our processor and graphics card. Note that while water blocks for RAM and hard drives exist, they're not really necessary and won't give them much of a performance boost. Water cooling is most useful to the processor and the graphics card. Radiator and fans. The radiator, coupled with attached fans, is what actually keeps the water cool that flows to your loop. Radiators come in multiple sizes, usually designed for a certain number of fans. The larger and the thicker the radiator, the more effectively it will be able to get that heat out of the system. Our radiators are 420mm, what means that you can attach 3 140mm fans to it. But you can get smaller 1 fan radiators or larger 4 fan radiators. If you have a big enough case, you can mount them inside your computer, but smaller cases will usually require you to mount them externally. Let's go to the reservoir. A reservoir. Your reservoir is what holds the liquid in the loop and makes bleeding out bubbles easy. Most reservoirs require you to mount them inside your case using the provided hardware, though some, like the one I'm using, are designed to mount inside your 5.2 external drive base. Or just, like in this computer, remove all the drive-bys and just mount it right exactly in those empty spots, if you have of course a big enough case. A pump. Like you can see right here, the pump is a pump and reservoir combination. Your pump is obviously what pumps the water around in your loop. You can buy an external pump or a pump that attaches to certain reservoirs, like in this case. In our case, we're using a pump that is built into our reservoir. Fittings. Let's talk about fittings. There are a lot of fittings on the market and people just don't know which one to buy because there are so many sizes. You need 2 fittings for each component in your loop: the water blocks, the radiators and the reservoir. These are what actually allow you to connect them to another with tubing. You can use barb fittings, which are just a spout, or compression fittings, which contain a second piece you screw on a super tight fit. They're better looking but more expensive. And in this build of mine we have compression fittings for hard tubing. Tubing. Your tubing is what connects each component together and it comes in multiple shapes and colors. When you buy tubing, make sure the inner barrel diameter ID is the same as the outer diameter OD of your fittings, otherwise it won't fit. Let's go to the stuff we put in all those parts. Coolant and additive. Lastly, you need a coolant. You can buy all sorts of coolants with different properties, but your particle to distilled water is just as effective as anything else, but it's super cheap, available at your grocery store or your local Home Depot shop, and it has less of chance of causing problems. Let's put it all together. Once you decided all your parts, it's time to put everything together. The process is a little involved and can be pretty scary at the first. This is also my first build, but as long as you go slow and follow the instructions, you should have a safe water loop running in no time. Step 1. Plan your loop. Before you do anything, look inside your case and plan out however your loop is going to work. Figure out where you can mount your reservoir and pump using the included hardware. Decide where your radiator is going to sit and in what order you will connect all the parts. Your reservoir should sit right above your pump in the loop, so the pump never runs dry. If your pump runs dry, it's dead and that is a waste of your money. If your reservoir isn't built for a drive bay, you'll need to either mount it in your case with the included hardware or find a spot to velcro it in place. The hard drive case is often a good candidate for this if you have the room. Once you figured out where all the parts go, decide how you're going to run your tubing. From the pump you can go to your reservoir, then to your water block, then back to the reservoir. Alternatively, you can go to the water block first, then to your radiator and then to the back. Neither provides a clear performance improvement over the other, so whatever looks good to you, you have to do it. The temperature in the loop is all the same, so it won't matter if you put the graphics card, then a radiator and then the processor, it won't matter. Step 2. Now that's everything clean and ready to go, install your main components. The water block will mount your CPU the same way as the other coolant would. Add a small dab of terminal paste to the CPU, set the cooler on the top, attach the back plate to the back of your motherboard and screw it onto place. When you screw it in, make sure you only give each screw a few twists at a time, moving in a star pattern so the pressure is applied evenly to your processor to prevent leaking. If you have a big enough case, you can mount the radiator just by mounting it to the vent your case usually go, then screwing the vent to the radiator itself. If you have a larger case, you likely mount it in the bottom, in the top or in the front. If neither of those are an option, you will need to mount an external using brackets that come with the parts. Now everything is in place, it's time to connect it all with your tubing. Screw your fittings into each component, making sure that they are good and tight before you continue so you don't have a leak. Now start connecting your tubing. Slide one of your tubing over a fitting, then measure how much tubing you'll need to connect to the subsequent component in the loop. Mark it with your finger and cut the tubing with a pair of scissors. Cut it straight as you can, connect the end of the tubing to the next component and repeat this process with each piece of hardware. Make sure you're connecting the tubing to the correct fitting each time. Your blocks, pump and reservoir should even have an in and an outlet. It won't matter which holes you use for your radiator. You may find during this step that the tubing makes a too sharp a turn, that it kicks for soft tubing. This is bad for your water flow, so you need to return to the planning stage and see if there's a way to make the bend without a kick. Sometimes giving yourself some extra tubing involves the problem, but other times you'll need to connect your components in a different order. To disconnect the tubing for your fittings, you may need to slice it back with a razor blade where the two connect. Pulling them off is often very hard to do. Lastly, if you're using barbed fittings, even if your tubing seems like it's on snug, use hose clamps or zip ties to secure them. You don't want them to pop off in the middle of your computing while running. Once everything is connected, it's time to fill up the loop. Some people recommend removing the loop from your case and testing it on its own, but I prefer to just test it inside the case. If you test it outside the case, you can still spring leaks by moving it back in, so it doesn't give you a ton of extra security against leaks, you can only make it worse. As long as you do everything slowly and connect it, you shouldn't have a problem. Just make sure you put some paper towel inside your computer and do a spring leak, plug it up, empty your loop and give your computer a 24 hours of dry off. Most of your hardware will be fine even if you just spat a little water on it. But just be careful. Then the last step, test your leaks and bleed out air bubbles. The last step is to let the entire loop leak for 24 hours. Let it run and check frequently to make sure it isn't leaking anywhere. During these 24 hours you should also find a lot of bubbles in your loop will bleed out. You may need to tip, shake or jiggle the case to help this process along, as well as tap or pinch the tubing. Don't worry if you have a few small bubbles left over, they will just go away by the time passes by. Here you have it, your first build guide to build your new awesome cooled water PC. And just like all those things, you learn by doing it and making mistakes. Yeah guys, that's just normal. So I hope this helps you. Please let me know in the comment section if you have any questions. Please like and subscribe, and like always, have a nice day.